Now, this is one that I saw kind of roaming around yesterday in what is happening with college football, Nick. And I know everyone has always talked about is Lane Kiffin, maybe the most vocal of all this past season on the players faking injuries in college football, getting that kind of fake timeout that you're able to go and you stop the clock, stop momentum especially. Well, the NCAA committee is going to be discussing rule changes on a number of things, including faking injuries. And one of those fixes, Nick, is for the player who goes down at some point during a drive, whether it is a fake injury or a real injury, has to sit out the rest of that drive. There is some pause in that from some coaches saying, well, what if it's my quarterback cramping up and we're one play in and there's 2 minutes left in the game? One of the provisions that will be discussed is that green dots, so quarterback on offense, and then whoever your green dot is on defense, typically seems to be a linebacker, because those are the smart guys kind of organizing everyone.
Middle linebacker.
Yeah, but those guys would be exempt. The green dots would be exempt. I look at this and I say, I think this is something that could be implemented relatively easily. And I like where it's going because you got to do something. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I do too. This is funny. I go all the way back to 2019, coming off the bye for Nebraska. They're taking on Indiana. Remember, they're wearing the black shirt jerseys, throwbacks. And Tom Allen, and it was Tom Allen's kid, was it not, that actually had a legitimate injury, but there was a sequence before that of an Indiana player going down almost every play. Nebraska's trying to get back into that game. They're going tempo. And we were all in the press box saying, come on, this is getting ridiculous. Yep. The fans were booing. And I remember then Indiana's administration throwing it back at Nebraska, basically calling everyone classless. Mm-hmm. It's something that has been going. I mean, and this dates even before the example I bring up there with Nebraska and Indiana. It's something that is frustrating. All the commentators, I remember watching a game this year, Kirk Herbstreit is just going off on it. It reminds me, Kaleb, a little bit of in baseball where there's not necessarily rules against it, but there's the unwritten or the unspoken rules that if you do things like that, you get earholed. Someone's going to send some chin music your way. And in a violent sport, maybe that's not the best thing. You want guys going after knees or anything like that. So you're like, oh, I'll show you a real injury here. But it is, and I think this is the time to do something about it, because everybody, even if they're more of a West Coast traditional pro style offense, everyone has tempo involved. Yeah. Everybody has that as part of their offense. It doesn't matter if you're running West Coast spread, whatever it is. There's going to be tempo involved, and you're going to have moments where you want to go to that, whether that's just your game or, hey, we like to do this at the end of the first quarter or in the middle eights or whatever you want to do, that it has to be addressed from the simple standpoint of it's that advantage. It almost in a way reminds me of what Dan Lanning exploited with 12 men on the field, where you can actually still run clock off it. This is something that has existed where too many teams, I'm sure at every level, I'm sure this is also going on at the FCS level. We just don't get a chance to see or talk about it as much, where until something is done, I can't blame teams for doing this, because this is up to the rule makers. This is up to the committees. This is up to the NCAA, whoever you want to trust that is going to actually put something out there concrete that'll be definitive, black and white with no gray area, and say, this is what's going to happen. So I would think the incentive of losing a guy for an entire series, an entire drive, would actually be the appropriate punishment. Now, I understand, well, wait, okay, quarterback or green dots, they would only have to sit out a play. How many teams would be cool if their quarterback was out for just a play? Like, there's a lot of coaches that wish losing your helmet didn't require them to take a timeout so the guy doesn't miss a play. So that actually is a big deal. I think it's a great deterrent, because we've got to get to that point. Now, if you have a legitimate injury, and a lot of coaches will claim, hey, that's a legitimate injury. I know it looked like we're trying to slow a team down. Well, do you necessarily want that guy right back out there in the next play after he's coming off the field anyway? So I think it does potentially serve two purposes. It protects players from coming in too early on a legitimate injury, but the bigger issue and the why on this thing and why this thing is being implemented is because this does create that deterrent of, yeah, you're not going to have to just sit out for one play. You're out for an entire series. And if you're cool with that guy being out for an entire series, hey, go ahead and you can have him fake the injury, but he ain't coming back in until you guys get the ball again.
Yeah, the quarterbacks aren't the ones who are faking the injuries,
No.
because they're trying to go with pace.
Right.
And defensively, if you've got a green dot middle linebacker, you don't want them out of the game.
Yeah, he's important. He's making calls.
One of the provisions that is possible in this this rule change, which there's a long ways to go on this because it's got to be talked about, then it's got to go to a different committee in April, and there's a long way to go on it still. But that you can essentially buy back your player with a timeout. If you take a timeout on the drive, if somebody had gone out with an injury, they can come back in.
So that's fine. You lose a timeout then. I mean, you're still losing something there.
Yeah, you have to make a decision. Is it worth losing the player, losing the timeout, whatever it is over the course of that drive? You bring up that Indiana game. I actually got hired at KLIN that same fall. I won the Halloween contest at the office because I wrote Indiana on a white shirt and I brought my dog dressed in a Husker jersey, and I would hype her up. As soon as she started running, I would fall down. Now, there were a lot of people in the office who did not get it. It was too deep of a cut for some people on the sales floor. But the people who got it.
And those are the best. Those are the best jokes or inside jokes or costumes. It's all it takes is the one person to get it, because when they get it, they're gonna be like, good on you. That is genius right there.
Exactly. Some other rule changes, potentially looking at moving the instant replay to a coach's challenge system, much like the NFL has. I know that's something that up at 1620, John Bishop is hammered on that. Anyone follows him on social media, there is one thing he hates in this world, and it is the instant replay, the way things are reviewed in college football. I kind of like it. I know that there are times. How many times did Matt Rule just make bad challenges last year, though?
Yeah.
And so like there's that question upon it, but I would like to see what does the full system look like, because I do think instant replay in college football, they've gotten to that like expedited replay, and it's not perfect. Replay is not perfect. It's better than having nothing there, but those expedited replays have seemed to go, oh, they did a quick check on it. You don't have to go to a full review. Great. It'd be interested to see. Okay, there was kind of an expedited review. They're not going to a full review. Now the coach is throwing a challenge.
The part that this is, and I noticed it more this year than any other year of, it's funny. We're talking about a rule to try to help the pace of play and not allow teams to grind it to a halt with faking injuries. This is the overall flow of college football. And this is the one thing that continues to drive me crazy in watching the sport is there's so much start and stop. And a lot of that has to do with the media breaks and the commercial breaks. But still, when we're having this game is played at such a competitive level and at such a high speed that I feel like there is so much review going on that it doesn't allow the game to have its full flow. And I understand why this is being considered, because college football is more popular than ever. But from a traditionalist standpoint, you have a lot of your old fans that still spend a lot of money that are on the fence with it, with the transfer portal, with NIL, with it being so close to the NFL model now, that you've got to make some concessions. And if there is something about the pace of play where, gosh, and now we have all of this review in there too, even the abbreviated reviews, they seem to make the game come to a grinding halt and it just has no flow. These are things that I think you have to look at, where it's like, okay, you know what? When it comes to a review, coaches, it's on you. Now, as we know, this isn't the worst thing for coaches either, because now you have unlimited resources when it comes to the amount of people you can have on staff. I know most big-time programs have people like this anyway, but you have your dedicated, we are looking at the film. As soon as there is a play, we're slowing that thing down, and we're letting you know if you should be calling a challenge or not. So I think, obviously, with what you can do on a staff, you should be able to pull this off and have a better chance at success when it does come to your challenges. I just think the abbreviated review, it's another element in the game right now. One is avoidable and one is not. The one that is not, I'm sorry, they're never going to do away with the TV timeouts. That's always going to be there because they got to pay the bills. But when
timeout, kickoff,
right, kickoff. Oh, okay, now he fair caught it. Okay, now we're going back to another commercial break. I think that if you can somehow expedite the review system to where it's just on the coach's challenges, you only have X amount of challenges. Maybe they give them one extra one than they normally would have. I'm not really sure how that's going to go, but I'm for it. I want to see this thing get a little bit more abbreviated to where we can have a little bit more flow back into the game.
Yeah. Another rule change that is potentially being looked at. There's, by the way, nothing on targeting. So if you're one that always wants changes to targeting, don't expect any of those changes. Wearable technology. And I didn't find a lot of explanation on what the wearable technology would be, but I would assume instead of, say, like receivers or everyone on the field having wristbands, it would be like what pitchers have in baseball now, where you just get the call and you just look at it and you go, yep, that's what it is. And you're not waiting for everything to get relayed into the green dot. They also want to expand a lot of that green dot, the helmet to helmet or the coach to helmet technology that the FBS instituted this year. You saw some FCS programs like North Dakota State because they were playing Colorado, they got to use some of that. They're expecting to try to expand all of that to the FCS level, which I think makes sense as well. Like if it's available and you're going to have games where you're playing each other, don't try to have it for just one game. I think FCS can benefit from having it the whole time too.
Yeah, if high school football can have technology on their sidelines, I don't see why, we can only make this an FBS thing. No, it makes sense to have it at every college football level. I don't even think that that's rocket science. I don't think we're overthinking it there. I think that just makes too much sense.
Well, and if one of your rules is on faking injuries and the exemption is the green dot, you have to have a green dot.
Great point. That's a great point. I mean, how are you going to make that as a deterrent when it comes to the FCS level too? Well, we don't have a green dot, so we don't have technology.
He's our designated green dot.
Yeah. He's our de facto, our quote. Right. Yeah.
Oh man. A lot of that, by the way, the Athletic New York Times had a whole bunch on those potential rule changes coming to college football.